what camera is best for wedding videography. That door's a sliding door. When we first got in here, I was indifferent about it, but I actually really like it. Today's video is gonna be a little more focused than normal. In light of shooting a couple of weddings today, we're talking about what camera, specifically Sony, we're gonna stay in the Sony ecosystem, but what camera is best for wedding videography. I'm gonna be going over 3 cameras that are really competitive and a couple of different price points. We're gonna start with the camera that I have the most experience on, mostly just because I own this camera and I've used it the longest, but it's going to be the Sony A7S3. This camera, when it first came out, just blew everybody's mind, from the dual native ISO to the just different color profiles that you can get, 10-bit video, and just not even to mention the hot shoe, all the capabilities that you can possibly do. There have been very little shoots where I've been thrown into or situations I've been put into that I haven't been able to pull something off successfully with this camera. A good example would have been yesterday's shoot. We were in a super dark chapel that honestly any other camera that wasn't this camera, I would have had to bring lights, but because this camera has a dual native ISO, I just bumped it up and I had to actually bring the f-stop up, or the aperture up, so that it wasn't blown out. So this camera has saved me in more ways than once. I can't express to you in words how much I love this camera. With everything that this camera brings, you start to compete and get into cinema camera range, which if you are interested in getting the cinema version of this, it's actually gonna be the second camera we're gonna talk about. It's gonna be the FX3. Now for $400 more, you can actually get, it's basically a Sony A7S3, just in a cinema camera version. With that, you get everything that you get for the most part. If you would buy a cinema camera from Sony, you get all the different graphs, you get all of the different readouts, and it's basically the sensor and everything that, from what I've been able to tell and all the research I've done, it's basically A7S3 packaged in a cinema line with all the cinema features that you would get. Now you might be asking, why would you get the A7S3 over the FX3 or the FX3 over the A7? It comes down to really personal preference. For me, I think I would choose the A7S3 over the FX3, mostly because that's what my background is in. I'm used to dealing with DSLRs or SLRs, and the A7S3 is basically a mirrorless camera that looks like a SLR, versus the FX3 is more of a cinema camera type of thing. And if you're more comfortable with the cinema stuff, then I would say get the FX3 or the next camera we're gonna talk about. If you're more used to and feel more at home with the traditional camera, then I would stick with the A7S3. With these, they're fantastic cameras and you can't really go wrong with any of them. This is mostly just personal preference. And the last camera is actually going to be the most affordable. Looking back, if I would have started getting into wedding filmmaking from scratch, I would have probably got this camera, but that's going to be the FX30. Now, this is an APS-C crop sensor, meaning that it's not a full frame sensor like the previous two, but because of that, the price is only $1,600 for the body, which is significantly less than the A7S3 and significantly less than the FX. And honestly, for the money and for the it's a super solid camera. I have people that I know that use the FX30 and swear by it. And because the camera is a APS-C sensor, the lenses that you can get for it are often going to be a lot cheaper than full frame lenses, but you can still use full frame lenses. You're just not going to get that whole sensor that you would get with the A7S3. But if that's all you need and if you're the only one doing your films, then honestly, the FX30 is a great starting place. The only caveat or the only issue that I foresee if you get the FX30, and this is the stupidest reason in the world, but I do know people that if you have a APS-C sensor, that kind of disqualifies you from shooting gigs. People typically want full-size sensors. I don't know why, but it is something to think about if you're thinking about going the APS-C route. Okay, those are 3 lenses that I would recommend. I get that question a lot, like what camera should I get? Those are the 3 that I would recommend. I'll link them all down below.